Hello and welcome to Unstressed. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am recording this podcast, custodians that have been on this land for tens of thousands of years. That is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, whom we have a great deal to learn from about connection. For people and country, the two are inseparable. Well, today we are going to explore addiction, and we are talking about much more than just alcohol and cigarettes or drugs. As you will learn, the list is long, and you may have in passing said to yourself, oh, I'm really addicted to. Well, maybe you are, but it does raise some interesting issues, and we cover many of those issues and how to deal with them in this program. It is a really interesting perspective on mental health in general and addictions in particular. My guest is Tara Hurster. Now, Tara is a psychologist whose clinic is in Sydney, the Tara Clinic, and as you'll hear, the Tara in the clinic stands for more than just Tara's first name. And you will hear the list of addictions are very long. We explore what addictions are, what addictions there are, and how to go about overcoming them. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Tara Hurster. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Tara, addiction is a big problem, I think. Certainly we hear a lot about it, and there are some stereotypical images of what that means. But let's go back to 101 here. How do we define an addiction?
You're right. There is a lot of problematic language around addiction, and the narrative that's really sort of being put forward in Australia and in the world is that it's an illness or it's a weakness or it's some kind of defective character that only plagues those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And the reality is that that's just not true. It's not the case. What addiction is, if we get down to the real sort of nitty-gritty of it, is it's a behavior or an action that we have practiced regularly enough that it becomes a habit that is providing short-term, almost instantaneous relief of some form of big feeling or distress. Now, that means that when we come to the DSM-5 sort of diagnostics criteria, we're looking at things like, hang on, let me get the list out for you, because then I can be really accurate.
Well, the DSM-5 is a topic we've recently discussed with psychiatrist Mark Horowitz, and it's a big topic. I mean, everybody, are we all sick? I guess that's the question. Are we all? Is anyone normal?
Well, that's the thing. There is no such thing as normal because everybody is so unique. Though in the DSM-5, each of the addictions, in inverted commas, are sort of separated out into their own kind of category. And I've got a list here of sort of smushing them all together to sort of have more of a generic thing. So in order to be, quote unquote, labeled with an addiction or diagnosed to have an addiction, you need to meet at least two of the following criteria over a 12-month period. So there's a few here, so get ready. So consuming or doing more of the substance or behavior for longer than was originally intended. So that might be a situation such as I had a physical injury and I needed specific pain medication to manage the pain as a result of that injury or surgery. And then I've continued using that medication for longer than what was initially intended, right? So that's an example.
Okay. Just read that one again, because I think that's an interesting one before we even kick off.
Absolutely. So consuming or doing more of the substance or behavior and for a longer than it was originally intended.
Okay.
So if you think about the more part is perhaps you might say, I'm going to have 2 drinks tonight, and then you end up sort of finishing the night with 10 drinks and you're doing that regularly. That's also another indicator.
Sure.
Right?
Go on. Next one.
The next one is wanting to cut down or stop, or have tried unsuccessfully to cut down or stop. So that's really where we're going, all right, I'm not going to drink tonight, or I'm having Feb fast or dry July or whatever it is, and that's a real struggle. Or you've tried to cut down going from 10 drinks to 3 drinks, and it's just a real challenge to do that. The third point is spending a lot of time thinking about, seeking out, using, or coming down from a substance or behavior, right? So the example might be planning or getting excited about Thursday night because we get to finish work early and we go out for drinks. If there's a lot of time planning and there's a lot of time sort of focusing on that, then we're drinking for an extended period of time. So there's a long time sort of actually consuming the substance. Then there's a period of time of, detoxing from that substance. So hangovers, things like that. So Friday morning into Friday midday, you're feeling really hazy and it's all just kind of blech is the technical term. And then looking for, how are we going to do that the next day, right? So that's that sense of sort of planning, thinking about, basically spending a lot of time in and around this behavior. That's the third one. The fourth one is experiencing cravings or a strong desire to use or act out. So that's where we get that real big urge, right? We get that urge or desire to drink or use, gamble, have sex, eat food, watch porn, do work, whatever it happens to be, whatever the problematic behavior is. Because addiction is not solely a chemical-based process. It's not just drugs or alcohol. There are also things called process addictions, which is where it's a behavior. And so, on our website, you mentioned that there's a big list on
Yes,
on
and
the
I
website.
want to explore some of those. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of those are shopping, some of those are work, some of those are screens. These things aren't necessarily putting into your system a specific substance. However, the interaction with that behavior, it basically switches on the brain in the same way as if you were to drink alcohol or use cocaine or, whatever it is. So yeah, experiencing the cravings or a strong desire to use or act out. Fifth one is using or acting out is getting in the way of being able to fully engage in work, relationships, or daily duties. So often with clients that come to the Tara clinic, they're usually, very successful in high pressure positions of power or prestige in the community. And so they have a real sense of, needing to work or needing to be the center of attention at the party, the life of the party, whatever it is, right? But by doing those things, by drinking to excess or using drugs to excess or working to excess, it's actually getting in the way of their relationships or perhaps their health or their safety. It might be getting in the way potentially of their finances as well. So this is where we're doing it, even though it's giving us a bad outcome, we're still doing it anyway, right? So that's that one. The next one is continuing to use or act out despite it negatively impacting on or causing problems for you socially or interpersonally. So that's sort of similar, though it's kind of more, the first one is more about noticing the immediate impact of this problematic behavior. The second one is more about it being a long-term issue. And even though it's a long-term issue, we're still doing it. So it's sort of like immediate risk versus ongoing problems. Then important social, occupational, or recreational activities are given up or reduced due to using or acting out. So this is really where we stop doing the things that we used to love doing, right? Or we feel like we don't have time for the things that we used to love doing because all we're doing is working, as an example. Using or acting out is impacting on your physical safety or well-being. So that might be that we are using a cocktail of drugs and alcohol, and that could be impacting on you in terms of your health and well-being. You might be drinking and driving, which is also putting yourself and others at risk. So these are some of those examples for that one. Then continuing to use even where there are physical or psychological problems that are likely caused or exacerbated by using the substance or doing the behavior. So a great example of that is liver function tests, right? If you have poor liver function and you still continue to drink alcohol, then that is demonstrating that there's a problem here. The second last one is noticing a tolerance to the substance, or noticing you feel you need more of the substance, or doing a higher risk-taking behavior to get the same buzz, or having the same amount doesn't impact you as much as before. So, for example, first time you drink alcohol, you know, maybe you were a teenager, you had a beer, it kind of got you all fuzzy in the head and you were, you know, giggling like crazy. Now, if you have one beer, you have a tolerance, right? So it's not giving you the same impact as what it did when you first started to drink. So when we look at tolerance, it could be either drinking more to try and get that buzz, or just noticing that you don't get the buzz at all. And it's almost like you drink to feel normal. So that's kind of what's happening there. And then the last one is experiencing withdrawals from the substance you've used, or, you know, a behavior. So it's almost like if you go on holidays and you absolutely can't unwind or switch off, then there might be a problem there with regards to your work, because you're struggling to kind of detox, in inverted commas.
And if I'm not mistaken, the DSM-5, you've listed out there, what, about 10 different criteria? And if you tick 2 of those boxes, you have an illness.
That's right.
Which is opens up a whole lot of other discussion about what the DSM-5 was really all about.
Yes.
Whether it was about reaction or pathologizing and making it an illness, which gave psychiatrists a bigger hat to wear. But I mean, I think as people would listen to that, would go, okay, interesting, that, yeah, and not quite, maybe. But really, out of those 10, all you need is to tick 2 of those boxes, and hey, guess what? You're addicted, which leads me to almost a rhetorical question. How big a problem is addiction?
Yeah, look, anytime I've read out that list on any sort of interview that I've done, usually the response is, well, clearly myself and everyone that I know has some form of an addiction.
Yeah.
And you're right. According to that, that is true.
Yeah.
So part of what I think is important to remember is that, like with anything, if a decision is made in a silo, then we're not actually getting the full context of the situation, right? So if we're thinking about ourselves and we're thinking, okay, I've ticked 2 of those things, though I'm not really feeling like it's, you know, majorly impacting, then it doesn't mean that you have to go to rehab. You know, there are other things that you can do to explore what level of treatment or change would benefit you to build a full, rich and meaningful life outside of these things. So I think I heard recently or late last year that I might be fudging the numbers here, but I think it was like 78% of people with an addiction are full-time employed. So high functioning individuals are, you know, they could be your boss, they could be part of your team, they could be your neighbor, they could even be your partner, they could be you. Then you're trying to pretend that it's not happening, right? Addiction is, it doesn't discriminate. There's no sort of key criteria that makes an addiction happen. You know, there are certain things that may escalate the chance of you living with an addiction, but it doesn't mean that just because you had childhood trauma, you're going to be addicted to something, or just because you had, I don't know, an injury and were given opiates for your pain management, that you're going to automatically become addicted to heroin. You know, these things, it's not a linear thing. It really comes down to the skills and tools and strategies that you have learned and regularly implement in your day-to-day life that allow you to manage stress and distress. And really, that's when I look at how I treat addiction, I don't actually talk about the problem at all, like the symptom, which is the drug use or the alcohol use or the porn or the sex or whatever it is. That I don't really even focus on that. I focus on the driver behind the behavior. What's the purpose of the use, and what are you trying to get out of it? So, for example, let's use alcohol because it's a pretty common one. We drink alcohol when we get home from work because we feel stressed and we want to relax, right? So the driver behind the behavior is stress, and the outcome that you're after is relaxation or a release. So if we go, all right, let's just take alcohol out of this equation for a second. You're experiencing stress, which you're trying to manage in order to receive a release or relaxation. So where can we start to implement some problem solving and management strategies ahead of time to manage the stress before it happens? And what are some other ways that we can implement relaxation or release so that we're getting the true outcome? Because alcohol doesn't actually fix the problem, and alcohol doesn't actually give you the result that you're after. It's a muscle relaxant, which sort of makes the brain believe that I'm relaxed, but it's actually just the physiological interaction between the chemicals and the way that your body deals with those chemicals that's why having a drink at night, in inverted commas, is giving you relaxation. It doesn't solve the problem that caused the stress in the first place, and it doesn't actually give you relaxation. So if we just remove that and focus on, all right, well, what is the stress that's happening? Is there a way that we can delegate something? Is there a way that we can communicate early and often to set expectations more effectively? Is there, increasing our exercise or our mindfulness practice will help to manage stress and also will give us that release and relaxation? Can we schedule in a weekly massage? Can we, do the bathtub at the end of the day, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. But before we go into that approach, and I know, I love the fact that Tara Clinic, apart from your own name, stands for Therapeutic Addiction Recovery Assistance. And we want to talk about that. But I want to come back still to the addiction itself, because you've listed out 10 criteria, and according to the DSM-5, which is the Bible of psychiatry,
yes,
and mental illness, you only need to tick 2 of those boxes. So let's put that aside for a moment, because, we could talk about what a great business model that is. but in your experience, when clients come to see you, how do you assess whether this addiction is a problem? I mean, in a nutshell.
Well, the biggest and most obvious indicator that there's a problem is the fact that they're in front of me to begin with.
Okay.
Because most of the time, people aren't going to seek out support for something if they don't perceive it as an issue in some way.
Yep.
And I feel that while yes, I am an expert in this field, and yes, I am highly, highly experienced and confident and competent in being able to do all of this, the reality is that the person that's sitting in front of me is the expert in their life. They are the expert in their story. And so they're going to know whether or not what is going on for them is actually a problem or not. So the way that I look at it is I don't like to assess someone and tell them something that they're not ready to hear, because, you've got the stages of change in the research. There's 5 stages of change. I believe there's 6 because I've lived it. We can talk about that if that's of interest to you and your audience. Though the thing that I think is important, and the question that I feel you're asking, is what does it look like to have an addiction? How do I know if I have an addiction? And
well, I guess the people who are sitting in front of you are going, there must be a commonality in the story that they tell you that's brought them to this point of realization.
Yes. And usually the story is I am so successful in all areas of my life, or I'm pretty successful in most areas of my life, yet I can't for the life of me solve this problem, and I don't understand why this is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
That really is the main storyline. That underpinning thread is I don't understand why I can't get a handle on this when I've been able to build a multi-million-dollar business, or, be a mum of 5 kids and, keep everybody alive, or, whatever it is, right? I'm successful in other areas of my life and I just can't seem to solve this problem. And whether the problem is, too much porn use. So, for example, I've, had clients come to me in different age groups, different genders, different, work sort of space. And the common thread is I'm noticing that I'm spending too much time on the computer watching porn. That is impacting on my, let's say, if they have a relationship, my sexual intimacy with my partner. If they're single, it's getting in the way of me having motivation to go out and date, to find someone, because, I've got my toys, or I've got my hand, or I've got whatever it is to kind of do it myself. So I'm not getting that motivation to actively go out and seek a relationship. So part of what tends to happen is there's this real sense of disconnection, right? The same can be said for someone who's drinking too much. There's arguments in the home. There's, performance issues in work, and, often sexually as well. There's a lot of these things that are building this disconnection, right? They're kind of the common themes. Is there's this real sense of disconnection and a lot of time and energy being in the problematic behavior.
I mean, I think I'm looking now at the list that you have on your website, and it's a long list. And I think there are some statistics, some examples that are just everybody acknowledges. Cigarettes is an obvious one. Alcohol is another one. Cocaine is another one. But I think there are some that people may not recognize as addictions that are impacting negatively on themselves and their relationships. I think technology is one we've explored before, but this is when you just have to look anywhere to see that has got to be the big one, or one of the big ones. Shopping is another one, but we'll come to that. But go on, tell us what your perception, or what you've noticed in that space.
Yes, it's to explain that I need to come back to the brain.
Okay.
I have a crush on the brain. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think it's just such an incredibly intricate organ that we all possess. And so if I break the brain down into 3 really simple sections, you've got the back part of the head, which is really what keeps us alive as a human and as an individual and as a species. So the back of the brain deals with, core temperature, needing to pee or poo, your sex drive, hunger, those sorts of things that literally keep us physically alive. The front part of the head deals with all of our higher order thinking. So problem solving, conflict management, language, personality, memory, emotions, all that stuff that makes us really human is at the front of our head. In the middle, attached to the bit that keeps us alive, that's really where our natural threat response lies. So our threat response is fight, flight, freeze, faint, and fawn. All 5 of those things are normal, natural, healthy, and helpful management techniques to implement when we have a tiger in front of us that wants to eat our face, right?
Give us those 5 F's again. I love that.
Absolutely. So we have fight. So I'm going to kill the tiger.
Yep.
Flight. I'm going to run away from the tiger.
Yep.
Freeze is I'm going to just stand really, really still and hope it doesn't notice me. Faint is one of two things. Either you literally pass out, right? Because, some people do literally pass out, or you kind of almost dissociate. So you sort of step out of the reality, and that's kind of part of what faint is. And then fawn is really about, in human world, fawn is, I'm going to try and make myself exciting for you or helpful for you or good for you. So I'm going to people please, or if I'm in a threatening situation, I might try to use, I might try to flirt with you if I'm feeling threatened, right? To try and make you not feel as threatening, or whatever it is, right? So fawn is basically trying to make yourself appear cute so that you don't get eaten, or feed the tiger so that it doesn't eat you, right? So those things. So fight, kill the tiger; flight, run away from the tiger; freeze, hope it doesn't see you. Faint is either space out or drop. And then fawn is try and feed it so that you become useful.
I love that, Tara. Is that your own little thing? Or I mean, fight and flight is what we hear a lot about, and freeze has certainly come up in the polyvagal theory of Stephen Porges, etc. But I love this faint and fawn. Okay.
Yeah, look.
They're not the 5 stages you were talking about.
No, they're not.
No, that's a different one. We're going to come to that.
Yes.
Or 6 stages.
Yes. Look, I did not make that up. That is coming from the research of how the brain deals with threats. And I would love to be able to say that I came up with that. I would love that. But no, that is not.
Well, good on you. Good on you. But anyway, that's so interesting and an interesting way. And I love your dividing up of the brain. I mean, because we spend a lot of time in the threat stage of things, and actually one could argue that it's part of a great business model to keep you in the stage of threat where you look to soothe yourself in some way.
Well, yes, because so here's the thing is when I'm not a big words person, I never have been, it's just not my vibe. So there's a whole heap of chemicals that are produced by the fight or flight part of your brain, and I just call it mush, right? So when mush is in your brain, what happens is it actively switches off everything that we don't need to run away or fight the tiger, and switches on everything that I do need to run away or fight the tiger. And one of the things that it switches off, because it's completely unnecessary and actually problematic if you're dealing with a tiger situation, is it actually switches off the front part of your head. So that's the part where you have logical thinking, problem solving, conflict resolution, language, memory, all of those things that make us really human get actually switched off when we're in a stressful situation. Now, the brain hasn't evolved in as fast a way as what our environment has evolved. And so when we are in traffic, or we have, a deadline at work that we need to hit, or else something happens, right? Or if we have an argument with our spouse, or I don't know, it could really be anything. It switches on that threat response part of our brain in the same way as if we had a tiger drooling in front of us when we were in a cave. And so our brain reacts rather than responds, because responding takes time. And time is not a helpful thing to be using up when you have teeth and claws in front of you. You want to be dealing with things really fast, so you want to react. And what happens is the brain remembers what helped to save our life last time in the quickest way possible. So if it saved our life, for example, let's say we're back in the Ugg days when we had saber-toothed tigers trying to kill us, and we're walking through the forest and we hear a twig crack, and we turn around and we see a tiger. Tiger's probably a poor choice because it can probably climb a tree, but let's pretend a tiger can't climb a tree, right? So we look and we see a tiger and we go, and we flight. So we race up a tree and sit at the top of the tree, and we watch the tiger, and it's trying to get us, it's trying to get us, it's trying to get us, and after a while it gets bored and goes away. Our brain says, when I see something that looks like that, I climb a tree because that saved my life this time. And it was pretty quick. It was pretty instantaneous. Fast forward to today, we have feelings of stress and distress, and we drink alcohol, or we have watch porn, or we eat sugar, or whatever it is. Our brain is experiencing a mood-altering behavior or a mood-altering substance. So almost instantaneously, our brain learns, oh, when I'm feeling those feelings, I do this behavior and I get this result really quickly. So it will then end up in a bit of a loop where anytime we feel stress, we go to that behavior because that behavior solved the problem in the short term last time. It doesn't matter that our logical thinking knows that drinking alcohol isn't going to change the fact that our boss is a douchebag, right? And if that's what's causing the stress, right? But the brain thinks that the drinking of the alcohol actually saved our life for the next time, so we can now go and deal with our next day without, surviving. And that's where it's not about the substance, and I guess or the behavior. That's not the problem. The problem is the brain has learned that by doing that behavior, you get a really instantaneous response, and it'll just do it again because it doesn't want to think.
So essentially, the addictive behavior is almost irrelevant.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you would say, because technology seems so different to consuming alcohol or cannabis or cocaine.
Yes.
And yet, no, it's not that different.
Exactly. So this is where the brain comes back in again, because when I have got up the tree and got away from the tiger and I've watched the tiger leave, I get flooded with these really happy hormones, right? It's called dopamine. And there's a few other ones, but I just sort of stick with dopamine because it's easy to say. So when we get flooded with dopamine, that's our brain going, that worked. I'm going to remember that. So I'm going to feel good and relate it to that behavior because that saved my life. So it's the same reason that orgasms feel really good, because they save humanity. It's through orgasms that procreation is, there's a motivation to procreate, and there's also the act of procreation. So the good feeling is literally linked to survival. So when we think about dopamine, poker machines have got loads of research on how dopamine is being produced as a result of the way that those machines work. The same can be said for social media algorithms. They're very closely linked to how casinos work. It's really interesting. I think there was a podcast on Joe Rogan. Yes.
There's a plug for Joe, as though he needs it on my podcast. That's all right. That's okay.
So there was a guest that came onto his podcast once that I happened to come across, and he was talking about how the way in which casinos are run and the research that's being done in casinos was actually being extrapolated out into Facebook and Meta and all of those things. Sure. And it really is about providing the brain with a consistent buzz of dopamine. So when we experience boredom, back in the day when we didn't have phones and computers literally in our pocket, we would draw, paint, sing, play. We would go and, build something, or go for a walk, or hang out next to a tree. Those things gave us the dopamine hit. But those things take more time to give us the dopamine hit. So our brain is all about using the smallest amount of calories when it is stressed as possible, because calories literally keep us alive, right? So if our brain needs to use a lot of calories to get to the life-saving outcome through going for a walk or hugging a tree or, going for a swim, whatever it is, then all of a sudden realizes, oh, if I flick through Facebook, I get distracted and then I feel really good. It's going to say, well, I'm not going to spend the time going for the walk. I'm going to do the shorter option because I save more calories that way. And again, back in the UGG days, calories were not as easy to come by as they are these days. We didn't have supermarkets and fast food and Deliveroo and all of those things. We literally had to go out and either forage for our food or kill it, and both of which took calories. So the brain is really a primitive thing that we are trying to navigate a very modern world using this primitive sort of resource.
And of course, you're talking about instant gratification as a way of satisfying that. And of course, that is what we have in our modern world. I mean,
Absolutely.
Instant gratification. And I guess one could include technology, shopping, porn, gambling, all on those levels there. And but coming back to overcoming addiction, I mean, I think we've established that it is a problem and there are many aspects to it, but it really has a commonality to whatever addiction we have. And I come back to your Tara clinic for therapeutic addiction recovery assistance. And I think people are familiar with the 12-step program of AA, although I must say I know of it. How does that differ from the way you would approach this problem? I mean, maybe it'd be worth just saying what it is first and then how you would approach it.
Sure, absolutely. So the 12-step program started back in sort of the 1940s, I think, in America. And it was started by these two men who had experienced a lot of problems with alcohol, and they came together and sat on their porch together and spoke about all the awful things that had come about as a result of their alcohol use. And what they found is that by doing that every day, they noticed that each day they were able to sort of be held accountable, and they were able to choose not to drink alcohol for another day. And they found that in this sense of kind of community and connection that they were building, that they were able to step away from the behavior that they didn't want to do anymore. And that is really where the 12-step program kind of came to be. They wrote the big book, which is the 12 steps.
You don't have to go through the 12 steps.
Yeah, because I was going to say Russell Brand wrote a modern version of the 12-step program, and it's literally there. It's literally called Recovery. So if you look up, if you're interested in the 12-step program, Russell Brand is a very big advocate for the 12-step philosophy. So the book is called Recovery. And he kind of rewrote the 12 steps to be sort of more modern language, and he swears a lot. So it's kind of funny to read. But basically what it talks about is that you, first of all, need to acknowledge that you are powerless over this addiction. And the biggest difference between the 12-step framework and the Tara clinic is that I don't believe in powerlessness. I believe in empowerment. And by the way that I look at it is when you feel, when someone who is quite highly successful is told that they have to, believe that they are actually powerless over something, that's such a clash with their worldview that it can be really quite problematic, and they can become resistant to that. So it's not that the 12-step program is bad. It's just that it doesn't work for everyone because not everybody aligns with that notion of powerlessness. For some people, it's really valuable to have the 12-step program because it's very clear. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do. If you do the things that you're not allowed to do, you have relapsed, and therefore you need to go back to the beginning and start again. The Tara Clinic doesn't look at it like that. I actually look at, I've completely changed the language. So in the research and in the 12-step program, well, the 12-step program only uses the term relapse. And in the research, the terms are lapse and relapse. So lapse at the Tara Clinic, I call it a lesson. So you have a lesson when you have made a decision, for example, that you don't want to drink alcohol tonight, all of a sudden you have a drink in your hand, you've had a couple of sips, you go, oh shit, hang on, I didn't actually want to do that. And then you pour the drink out, you put the glass away, and then you go and do something helpful, right? That is a lesson. That's an opportunity for learning. And from my perspective, I feel it is a fundamental aspect of the foundation of learning in early recovery. Whereas with the 12-step program, the moment that you've had a lapse or a relapse, you have to start counting from day one again. So there are people who have had, 10 years worth of sobriety, and they have a lesson, and then they have to go down to day one. And the way that I look at that is it can be quite problematic because it is almost through the language, it's negating the learning and the development that someone has had over that last 10 years and pretending that doesn't exist or it doesn't count for anything. Whereas from my perspective, I feel that it's through those lessons that we can work out what were we doing really well, what could we do differently next time, and what were the things that we learned that we had no idea were triggers for us as a result of this lesson. So the 12-step program is very much abstinence-based. And that means that if you are experiencing problems with, say, alcohol, then the expectation is that you're going to stop smoking. You're going to also stop doing any form of drug use. And in some cases, it might even go so far as sugar and caffeine and prescription medication for, antidepressants and things like that. It depends on which sort of community you're a part of as to how strict it kind of can become. And the idea is that you identify as an addict. So each time you attend a meeting, you say, hi, I'm Tara. I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for 743 days. And let me tell you all about all the bad things that happened to me when I was drinking. That's kind of the framework of an AA meeting, where the way that I look at it is our words mirror our thoughts impact on and are impacted by our belief systems, and our actions and outcomes are driven by all of those three things. So if I say that I'm an alcoholic, therefore I think about myself as an alcoholic, and I believe that I'm an alcoholic. So that means that my actions are going to be as someone who is an alcoholic, which might be filled with fear around alcohol and desperately trying to avoid it all the time. Or it could be, self-sabotaging and then going down the rabbit hole of alcohol use because, I'm an alcoholic and that's what an alcoholic does, is they drink to excess the moment they have a sip. Right. So this belief system can sometimes actually get in the way of true holistic recovery. I guess this is where the stages of change can actually come.
I knew they would come in. So
yes.
Let's go. 6, not 5, as you pointed out, but 6 stages.
Absolutely.
Change. Go on. Tell us about those.
Absolutely. So for those
because Tara, I must say, people, where you get up, I am an alcoholic. I wonder whether, saying I am an addict would open you up to a whole can of worms, because if you've substituted alcohol for a socially acceptable thing like, say, shopping or technology,
yes,
which I can imagine a lot of addicts would do, that's another thing. But go on, talk about the 6 stages of change.
Yes. So I'm going to use a visual aid. So for those of you who are watching, awesome. Those of you who are listening, maybe find the video. But this is really the stages of change. So the pre-contemplation stage is really kind of seen as denial or no hope, feeling like I don't have a problem or there's no solution, so why would I even bother trying, right? In here is when we're actively living within our addiction. Then we have the contemplation stage. So contemplation is really acknowledging that there might be a problem here, or there could be an option for a solution, but I'm not really ready to do anything about it yet. I'm just sort of acknowledging that something's kind of there. There could be an issue or there could be a solution. So then we move into the preparation stage of change. And the preparation stage can really be like, all right, I've acknowledged that there's an issue and I'm exploring my options, or I'm starting rehab, or I'm starting therapy, or I'm reading some things, or I'm doing some courses. I'm learning about it, but I'm not implementing yet.
Sorry, that fourth stage again?
So
we had contemplation followed by...
preparation is the third stage of change. Yeah. So we've got pre-contemplation, which is denial or there's no solution. Mm-hmm. Contemplation, which is there might be an issue, but I'm not ready to do anything about it yet. And then preparation is the third one, which is where we've acknowledged that there's an issue. We've acknowledged that there's some options. We're exploring those options, but we're not necessarily implementing them yet. You'll see that there is a sort of a darker color moving towards a lighter color. And what that's sort of demonstrating there is that we're starting to explore the option of moving away from the addiction and towards recovery. But the biggest change in color is between preparation and action, which is the third and fourth stage of change. So the action is a completely new interaction with ourselves and with the behavior. Action is where we're actively implementing some of the strategies. We're truly starting to do the work. So in preparation, we might be doing some of the learning, some of the understanding, some of the, we're kind of interested in it. And we might stop, because stopping and changing are two very different things. So we might stop, which might mean we do, dry July for a month or something like that. That would be in the preparation stage of change, because we're kind of holding on and white knuckling it for a month. And then we get to the end of the month and we go, woohoo, I did it. Let's have a drink to celebrate, right? That's quite often what happens. So in action, that's where we're truly starting to change. We're starting to look at all areas of our life and our identity in a new and unique way. So we're thinking about things like, all right, how are we setting boundaries? How are we communicating to people in a healthy and assertive way? What kind of relationships are we building and maintaining, and which ones are we moving away from? What are some of the behaviors that we're choosing to do, the pastimes that we're interested in, all of those sorts of things? We're actively starting to do the work. Then we move into maintenance. Now, in the research, maintenance is the final stage of change. However, from my perspective, I don't agree. Maintenance is really where we're still doing the work, but it's not as hard because we're kind of becoming more used to it. It's sort of becoming more of our day-to-day lifestyle, right? However, in the maintenance stage of change, you will still experience a lesson here and there. And that's really valuable. It's really valuable because over time, our lifestyle changes, so our style of living, and, what we're doing and who we're interacting with and the stresses we may overcome, they're going to change. So there will be times where we will be faced with a situation where we think, oh shit, I don't know how to handle this. I'll have a drink, and then go, oh no, hang on. I've got other things that I can do, right? And then you start to implement those things. So in maintenance, we're still kind of doing the work. It's not that hard anymore. Recovery is where, in the diagram, you literally flick off and you move away from this cycle completely. And the recovery is where you have completely redefined the nature of your relationship to your own identity and also to the world around you. You have reparented yourself into such a way that you are living a full, rich and meaningful life in the way that works for you, rather than the way that society believes you should be doing it, or your friendship circle believes you should be doing it, or media says you should be doing it, right? You are building the life that you want. Now, if I use my own example, so I'm in recovery and I literally forgot that I was in recovery until last year. That's what I mean by recovery. You can literally forget that you lived with an addiction. It's still part of your story, but you don't identify with it in the same way as when you're in the stages of change. So when I was in year 6, I was picked on a lot because I was the tallest in my school. I was always very tall. When I was born, the doctor said it's a longie before it's a girl. So I was always destined to be very tall. And I was picked on, and I heard that smoking stunted your growth. So I started smoking when I was in year 6 to solve that problem.
Wow.
When I got into early adolescence, I started to identify as a smoker. So it was part of being cool. It was part of who I was. I had a purpose because being tall and looking the way that I did when I was a teenager, I looked like I was 19. So I was also able to purchase all of the cigarettes for everybody else that wasn't able to purchase cigarettes, right? So there was this sort of purpose driven, there was this connection that was built between this group of kids that I was a part of. When I got to sort of 16 years old, I started to notice little sort of wrinkles on my lip. And I was really unhappy about that. So I moved into contemplation, right? So I moved out of pre-contemplation into contemplation. So I saw that there might have been an issue. Like I wasn't okay with being a 16-year-old girl and having little wrinkles on my lips because of smoking for that long. But I wasn't ready to do anything about it, right? Then as I moved into sort of year 11, so 16 was sort of year 10, year 11, sort of 17-ish, that was when I started to move into the preparation stage. So I just noticed that I naturally started to sit with different people. I would still go and have a cigarette at lunchtime and recess time in the smokers group, but then I'd leave and I'd go and spend time with other people and, different friends and do my schoolwork and all those sorts of things. As time progressed into year 12, I noticed that my body just naturally moved into the action stage of change. So in the middle of my HSC trial exams, I literally gave up smoking. And in the most stressful time of a teenager's life was when I moved away from cigarettes, which is meant to, quote unquote, relax you. And what I realized is that it's actually 3 to 5 minutes of deep breathing exercises in an environment away from a stressful situation, because I wasn't allowed to smoke inside. So I wasn't allowed to do it while I was studying, right? So when I realized all of those things, I started to swap things out. So I would use a long straw. I'd suck on a straw and it would give me the same sensation as a cigarette, but it wouldn't be harming me, right? It wouldn't have the same smell. It wouldn't have the same taste, all of those things. But my body was already ready to move on from it. The things that I noticed during that action stage of change is that I needed to put specific practical steps in place to make it easier for me to follow through with the action I was taking. I used to always hide my cigarettes in my car because I purchased my car. I had the keys for my car. My mum was not allowed in my car because it was mine. So that was where I would keep my cigarettes, because before I had my car, she would always find them and tear them up, and then I'd have to buy another pack, and it was really annoying. So when I had my car, they were always in the glove box or the center console. So when I was starting to move away from cigarettes, I noticed that I would automatically get into the car, open the center console, go to reach for my packet of cigarettes that wasn't there anymore. And it made me realize, if I had a packet of cigarettes still sitting in there just in case, I would probably be smoking right now. But because I didn't put cigarettes in there, it made me realize that my body was just naturally going through that habitual thing of reaching in for the cigarettes. So I was putting strategies in place to help myself achieve the outcome that I was after, which was to not smoke anymore. I was in the maintenance stage of change till probably about midway through my 20s. And what I noticed was that there were lessons that were occurring in a pattern. The pattern was that I would tend to buy a packet of cigarettes if I had a breakup, or if it was university exam time or like assignment time and I was really stressed. Those were the two times where I would notice that I would buy a packet of cigarettes, and I would have maybe one or two and then be grossed out and throw them away. And I was thinking about it over my 20s. I was thinking about what is going on here? Why am I still doing this? And then it clicked. I'm not living in a compassionate way when I'm in those situations. So when I was having a breakup, I was smoking to hurt myself because I wanted to wallow in the deep, dark pit of despair that I'm never going to love again, right? Because that's what it feels like when you're young. And when I was in stressful situations with uni, I was using it as, quote unquote, coffee, a stimulant, to try and keep myself awake so that I could finish the activity that I needed to do. And when I realized those two things, I thought, well, hold on a second. I don't actually want to hurt myself. So when I'm feeling really sad, maybe I can lean in with compassion. And I don't actually want to be pushing myself that hard. So when it comes to university, maybe I can implement some more time management strategies that mean that I don't have to be doing things the night before and needing cigarettes to keep me awake because I don't drink coffee, right? So when I realized those things, it was almost like an overnight change. And I haven't had a cigarette since. But I've been drunk with people who are smoking that would totally be happy to give me a cigarette, and it hasn't even entered my mind to ask them for one. So that's what true recovery is. You don't have to be scared of the thing. It just doesn't matter anymore for you.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you say that and use that word compassion. We've actually explored this with Professor Paul Gilbert, who's written the book, The Compassionate Mind. He's a world expert on it. But self-compassion is the key, and self-compassion, it must be such an important part of this 6 stages of recovery and overcoming addiction, self-compassion.
Absolutely. And the stages of change is not solely for addiction. It's for any behavior change. If you want to, be more intimate with your partner, or connect more with friends, or set some boundaries around your work schedule. All of these things go through that same flow. We acknowledge that there's an issue. We explore what our options are to make changes. We actively start making changes. We follow through, and then all of a sudden we're living a new way. That's how it works. But yeah, self-compassion and taking off your judgment pants. I always talk about take off your judgment pants and put on your reality pants, because shame and guilt actually take you back to the pre-contemplation stage of change, which means that when you're beating yourself up for doing something in your opinion that's wrong, all you're doing is getting in the way of you continuing to progress through those stages of change. You're taking yourself back to the beginning anytime you experience shame or guilt. So instead, just lean in with compassion, put on your reality pants. What is actually going on here? And how can I do things differently next time?
Listen, this has been terrific. I mean, it's such a huge issue, particularly when we look at it in a more broader sense. But I just wanted to finish up because, we're obviously going to have links to your Tara clinic and your website and all your resources. But if someone was listening to this who may not have considered they have an issue or whatever, just what would be a couple of tips that you would give people who are thinking, maybe I need to go on, give us 2 or 3 tips that we could do. Well, I mean, the 6 stages is a great one.
Yeah, well, being able to identify where you are on that stages of change is really helpful. There's a free resource on my website, actually, that helps you to identify where you are on the stages of change. Though in terms of practical tips, I think one of the most valuable things to do is actually to track your behavior. And if you track, say, alcohol or work or whatever it is that you're sort of unsure about, there are certain apps that you can use. There's not sort of one app that I would say this is the best app to use, because it kind of depends. They're all sort of different at the moment. But if you were to track, how often you drink, how much you drink, what time of the day, what day of the week, what week of the month, what month of the year, right? If you start to see, there's a pattern here. I thought I was only having a couple of drinks a couple of nights a week, but actually most weeks I'm drinking 5, 6, 7 nights a week. And I thought I was only having a couple of glasses of wine, but actually I'm usually finishing the bottle and I'm not even aware of it, right? Being able to just open your eyes and see what's actually happening, it gives you a really brilliant foundation to sort of leapfrog into, well, where do I want to go? What do I want my life to look like? How would I like that to happen? The second tip, I think, is look at the 2 reset buttons of the brain. So I spoke about the brain and I spoke about mush. Mush has 2 reset buttons, kind of like an Xbox or a PS5. It's probably a more recent PlayStation than PS5. I might be showing my age.
Rebooting is a technical fix-all anyway, so I think people can relate to the a reset idea. Go on.
Excellent. So if we go back to the Ugg days when we had the saber-toothed tigers and we were either killing it or running away from it, that meant that we were physically exerting our body to quite a high level for a short period of time, and then afterwards we relaxed. Sounds familiar? Exercise. So the more that we do exercise, but we do it in a way that our mind is connected to the fact that I'm moving my body for the benefit of my mental well-being or for my stress management or for whatever it is, then you will start to notice that the mush starts to go away from your brain. The front of your brain starts to switch back on again. You can start to make more logical decisions. So exercise is the first reset button of the brain. The second reset button of the brain is actually mindfulness or meditation. I prefer mindfulness over meditation because meditation is literally sitting down, with your legs crossed and doing the meditation thing. Whereas mindfulness, you can actively engage in mindfulness strategies. Once you're really well equipped with your mindfulness strategies, you can actually implement it while you're washing your hands, while you're brushing your teeth, while you're having a shower, while you're going for a run, right? You can implement mindfulness anywhere, whereas meditation is usually more of a sitting still in your spot doing the thing, right? And not everybody wants to do that. But mindfulness, what it does is it uses your mind to cool down your body, and exercise uses your body to cool down your mind. So if you're doing both of those things together, you're making educated and open decisions through a clear mind. And that's going to help you to see, from my perspective, it'll help you to see more what the reality of your situation is. You're putting on your reality pants. How often am I drinking? How often am I watching porn? How often am I working outside of the hours that I really want to be working? Yeah.
Tara, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your personal experience. Thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Ron.
Well, I love that positive message that this is about a journey through pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and recovery, and that if you stray, it's a lesson. You lapse, but you don't relapse. I also love the whole empowerment rather than being powerless. I love that concept because it's such an important message for us all on our health journey. Now, we've done programs, as I mentioned, with Paul Dillon on drug and alcohol addiction, and we've also done a program with Professor Paul Gilbert on compassion and particularly self-compassion. And we may really re-release those. I'm wanting to re-release some relevant podcasts because there is such a back catalogue of pearls and gems. And if you are a member of the Unstressed Health community, we are going back and editing and putting together topics that are giving you the highlights. So rather than having to sit through maybe 5 episodes on women's health, we will be condensing the pearls from each of those episodes for our members only. And that's in the Unstressed Health community. There are courses, there are webinars, there are Q&As, there's access to health coaches. I'd encourage you to join that. We will, of course, have links to the Tara Clinic. And if you feel that there is something there for you, well, obviously Tara has a unique approach to addictions that goes beyond the 12-step program you may have heard so much about. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.